We are in front of Kilroy's on Kirkwood, where Lauren Spear partied for the majority of the night 2 years ago on the night that she disappeared. Today, her parents are trying to gather enough evidence in order to convict the two men that were last seen with her on June 3rd, 2011. Jason Rosenbaum, Corey Rossman, and Michael Beth are the last known people who spent the evening with Lauren Spear on the night of her disappearance. She was reported last seen by Rosenbaum after she left his apartment at the intersection of 11th Street and College Avenue. She was highly intoxicated and had consumed cocaine and other types of drugs, on top of having a rare heart condition called long QT syndrome. Greg Garrison, who is the attorney for Michael Beth, explained she walked out of a building and then disappeared.
I think most folks know the sad story. This gal got pretty drunked up and just disappeared. And I mean disappeared off planet Earth. No one knows anything. There's not a hint, there's not a fingerprint, there's not a drop of blood, there's not a hair sample, there's nothing. She just walked out of a building at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning and nobody ever saw her again.
As of this past December, Michael Beth is now dismissed from the case. He was the roommate of Rossman and was tied into the lawsuit for allowing Lauren to come into his apartment on the night of her disappearance. Garrison filed a new motion for Beth, stating her 2-year disappearance cannot declare that she is dead. Therefore, he was not able to be sued for wrongful death.
The lawsuit seeks to impose damages on them, pay damages because of her presumed wrongful death. Well, she's just been gone. She's not been killed that we know of, and the rule in Indiana is 7 years. She is assumed still to be alive until there's unless there's some kind of overwhelming evidence for a period of 7 years, after which time she can be declared dead. That's like for life insurance purposes and that kind of thing. But the leap that the that the plaintiffs try to make is that because she's disappeared and we don't know what happened to her, therefore we can presume, which we cannot under the law, that she's dead. And if she's dead, then she died because they didn't take good care of her. And the court didn't buy that.
Within the past 6 months, Lauren's parents requested both Jason Rosenbaum and Corey Rossman's phone and academic records, spanning 134 days before and after June 3, 2011. But the judge felt it was too broad of a request and it was denied. Garrison believes their academic records are no one's business, but Jillian Young, a recent graduate at Indiana University, feels differently.
Because I think it's a very special case, and this town is really strange. The Laura Palmer, do you know the Twin Peaks?
Yeah.
The show Twin Peaks. There's some similarity between the two, and this town is already filled with college students. It's really strange, and I think it's really special. So the truth has to be told to everyone, and there to forbid, like in the future, missing students. And I just think it's really complex, and I think it's supposed to be, the truth should be reviewed. So I think in this case, the messages should be investigated by the people that are in the police department.
As of today, Lauren's parents are continuing to try and sue both Jason Rosenbaum and Corey Rossman for wrongful death. The civil suit accuses the men of negligence because they supplied 20-year-old Spear at the time with alcohol and did not make sure she returned to her apartment safely. Today is the 3-year anniversary of Lauren Spear's disappearance, and one thing is for certain. Regardless of the rumors and allegations, she did disappear. No evidence has come to surface, and no one has confessed to any knowledge of what happened to her that night. If you have any information in regard to the case, contact 812-339-4477. Remember, anything small could be big. Millions of animals are euthanized across the country every year due to overpopulation. After spending time with Chelsea Hannon, owner of For the Love of Rescue, which is a rescue center in Indianapolis, I was able to learn more about the industry. Chelsea Hannon merged together the idea of a pet supply store and a private rescue center under one roof.
Basically what we are is a pet supply store, but we facilitate all of the adoptions of a local rescue. So what's nice is when you go to other places, you're supporting puppy mills, but a lot of people don't know where to go to get animals. So I wanted to sort of have a rescue-friendly version of those pet supply stores. So it's sort of your one-stop shop, but you're also going through a private rescue.
There are some people who are not familiar with the difference between private rescue centers and public shelters. The two types of businesses have a vast array of differences in regard to the way they are funded and handled, but Hannon was able to explain how private and public shelters are able to work together.
It's basically a private rescue is going to be something where they take maybe more not high profile cases, but cases that will maybe cost more money that just isn't in a shelter's general budget to be able to cover. If they're overcrowded and it's starting to be a situation where they're going to have to be put on a euthanasia list, then a lot of times we'll come in and pull and see what we can do to lower those numbers, because if we don't, the shelters do the best they can. That's what they're set up for. But people don't donate. They'll come in and drop things off and never think about it again, but they don't give them food, they don't give them money to vaccinate them. And so if it's a situation where you have a dog that got hit by a car that came in and you can't even vaccinate all the animals in your shelter, you have no choice but to euthanize that animal. So a lot of times that's where the private rescues will come in and try to drum up, separate dollars to cover those things.
Private rescue centers typically carry a lower amount of animals at their facilities. At For the Love of Rescue, Hannon typically has around 20 animals at once, whereas public shelters have around 300. It is easier for private rescue centers to focus on advertising, donations, and posting updated information online on a daily basis due to having a smaller amount of animals. Private and public shelters have different obligations, but they still share the common goal of getting an animal to a safe home. Even though both private and public shelters are taking in animals, apparently there is a lot of rescue-to-rescue bashing.
I don't really understand, because if someone adopts your dog and not mine, great, your dog needed a home too, but you would be surprised how many people feel like it's a competition, which is really unfortunate. I've never felt like it's a competition. They all need homes.
The adoption process at either a private or public shelter can vary and has different qualifications, restrictions, and policies. If you are interested in adopting or giving up an animal, do your research to see if a private or public shelter is the best fit for you.
I was actually really